So here we have such an interesting and unique game between Magnus Carlsen and Yang Yiyu. We start the opening with a Pawnstorm and follow up with some great positional play. So d4, knight f6, bishop f4, d5, e3 and bishop g4. Bit of a sideline, black gains time around the queen. Typically white will play queen d3 here. Aim for queen b5 check. Now the bishop is no longer guarding this weak b7 pawn. So for example, black might play e6, we go queen b5 check, and black has some crazy lines where he sacrifices both the a and b pawns for an initiative. However, Magnus didn't go for this, he went for f3 instead, which scores a lot better. Black went bishop h5, which is not such a good move because it allows white to play g4, gain more time on the bishop. Better to play the bishop back to d7, safeguard this diagonal, and then play e6, c5 in the typical way. However, black went bishop h5, g4, bishop g6, and now h4. A slightly better move Magnus could have played was c4. The idea is to destabilise black's centre, gain a central pawn majority. So if black captures, we can capture with the bishop, develop our piece and control the centre. If black plays e6, we can follow up with knight c3, bishop d6, takes, and now if black really doesn't want to take the c4 pawn, we can go for c5 and then take over the queen side with a Pawnstorm. So Magnus went h4, an aggressive kingside option. It does allow black to play h5, which is a bit annoying because it blocks our whole Pawnstorm, and this kind of structure can become very weak if you don't know what you're doing. g5, knight fd7, and now bishop d3, keeping up the initiative by getting rid of this strong bishop. Bishop takes, queen takes, and now e6. Better move for black would have been knight b6. The idea of this is to reorganise his pieces because he wants to play queen d7, knight c6, and then ultimately play e6, bishop d6, get rid of the strong bishop, and then play for e5. Typical London plan. A more ambitious way that black plays the London when he knows the centre will open in his favour is c5, but it's not really called for here because white's going to be flowing into the centre with this very strong development plan, and then after the d-pawn's gone, he'll be attacking down the d-file. So it's a bit ambitious for black to go for the c5 plan, but he did. So he started with e6. g6 now. This very strong move destabilised the base of the pawn chain. Now if black had played knight b6, of course g6 you just meet with f6 and then you're going for e5 and you're doing very well. However, g6, f6, knight e2. Not a great move by Magnus. I mean, I don't want to criticise Magnus, but it's not a great move. It would have been better to play c4. Again, whichever way you play it, if black takes, of course, you take with the queen, and then black's got some weak pawns. If black leaves it, then we can take ourselves, and then we've got a 2-1 majority in the centre. We've got a very clear plan of knight c3 and e4. He didn't do that, he played knight e2, and now black went for c5. As I said, this is premature and very ambitious. It allows white to open the centre before black's even close to finishing development. Black still needs to move his knight out of the way, get this bishop out, get this knight out, castle, and so many moves he still needs to play. Better would have been knight b6 immediately, knight bc3, knight c6, keep the centre closed, castles, queen d7, then white can go for e4, typical London plan, castles, and now a3 for example, and you get a slow positional game where we're going rook e3, rook e1, maybe king b1, maybe even going for e5 at some point, whereas black has a clear plan of just trying to trade off bishops and equalise. But he went for c5, and now it's immediately +1 as you can see. c4, great move. This 2-on-2 forces the centre to open whichever way black wants to cut it. Knight b6, develop a piece, c takes d5, and now the trouble black faces here is after e takes d5, we can take on c5, knight bc3, knight c6, and now we're castling queenside, we're attacking the d-pawn 3 times, and black has no way to defend it. So very awkward for him. If instead the queen takes on d5, which is the move the computer recommends, we go knight bc3, actually sacrifice the f3 pawn, go rook f1, gain more time on the queen, queen g2, and now castles. And now because black's at least 2 moves away from castling, and we're threatening to open the d-file already, white's got a very nice advantage. What's this queen doing? It's got no more targets. Anyway, black went c4. What more can you really do? Queen e4. The idea is to exchange off the queens and then win positionally. Queen takes d5, knight bc3, queen takes, and f takes. Now, I really like this move. It looks a bit anti-positional. After knight takes, white's advantage is a lot smaller. You might think knight c6, knight d6 check, like this is great, but after bishop takes, white's actually got no advantage because this bishop has no good targets to attack. I mean, where's it going to go? So it's actually better to take with the f pawn, with the idea of going d5, perhaps e5 in the future. This is a very mobile pawn duo, and it's supported by white's active pieces. Knight c6, bishop c7. I love this move by white. He anticipates the threat of e5, which would probably force white to capture and then end up with a weak double isolated pawn. Instead, he plays bishop c7, preemptively threatening to double black's pawns. Knight b4, black counterattacks with the threat of knight c2 check with a fork, potentially knight d3 check, and it's very hard to dislodge this knight. But white's not impressed, he goes knight f4. Now I love this. This actually offers an exchange sacrifice. Of course, black can go knight c2 check, king d2, knight takes, but then we just take on e6 because this knight can't escape. The idea is if this bishop moves, we're picking up another pawn and potentially promoting. So black obviously can't castle. He can't move basically any of his pieces. He's almost in Zugzwang. The only active plan I can think of for him is rook h6, g6. In the meantime, we'll be playing the d pawn down the board. If he goes, for example, king d7, d5, we'll pick up this knight, and then we'll put our knight into a better square, potentially play for e5. This would be very scary for black to face because his rooks have no activity. But he didn't, he played king d7 because he's a super GM, he's smart, he doesn't fall for things like that. Bishop takes b6, a takes b6, double the pawns, very nice. King e2, just don't want to fall for knight c2 check. Bishop d6, and now a3. Here we have the start of a minor piece endgame where black slowly gets ground into the dust. Bishop takes f4. Now, instead of recapturing with the e-pawn and allowing knight d3 with a nasty fork, white just captures on b4, accepts the doubled pawns, but knows that his pieces are active enough to compensate for it. Bishop d6, now b5. We lock these pawns in place. We'll probably play d5 at some point. Potentially, if this bishop moves off the diagonal, we can play for e5 as well. Basically, any way to get our knight into the position, and we'll be winning. Bishop b4, knight a4, and now bishop a5. Black goes for a passive defense where he is maybe looking to bring the rook to h6, capture on g6, bring the other rook to c8, and perhaps force through c3. White obviously can't bring the king in to prevent this. But Magnus has a very simple plan to counter that. He can just double on the c-file, right? This pawn's going to drop. Black's not going to be in time to capture this pawn and generate any serious threats. Rook ac1, rook ac8, as I said, rook c2, rook h6, rook hc1, and now if rook takes g6, we've got a great move. Can you see it? The move is b4. I love this move. It's just so clever. I mean, the bishop can't capture here because it's pinned, because then knight b6 check will pick up the rook. The pawn can't capture en passant because then we'll capture the rook. So the pawn is untouchable and this bishop is trapped. If rook to g2 check, we've got king f3, rook takes, and then black's still in the same trap and he can't go en passant because the pawn wasn't moved on the last move. So very, very 4D chess by Magnus. So Yang Yi went c3 instead. Now we go b4. Anyway, and of course there's still the same idea of capturing on b6. So a lovely move. Rook c4 pins the pawn against the knight. And now b takes a5, rook takes a4, rook takes c3. Magnus has calculated this is a winning rook endgame, basically because, though after this, material is actually equal, we've got double rooks on the c-file, whereas black's rooks are pretty much as uncoordinated as you can get. White has ideas of making a mating net with e5. After takes, we bring the rooks in to deliver mate. e5, now f takes, d takes. There's really nothing to be done here. You can't actually prevent the threat of mate. If you go for rook a8, for example, rook c7, king e8, and you just start hoovering up pawns along the second rank. So, for example, rook takes, you can bring the other rook into the second rank, and it's over. So, great positional display by Magnus. He started with a Pawnstorm, bamboozled his opponent, and then got a winning endgame, flawlessly converted. So, that's what you do if you're a 2800, I guess. Anyway, I hope you learned something, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.